As we approach the final couple of episodes of the first season of Pluribus, I've been thinking a lot about how this has been one of the most thought-provoking shows of the year. It's almost broken the mold in not really having a protagonist that we root for, because in Carol Sturcker we've found somebody that's relatively easy to dislike due to her behaviours and mannerisms, and even then when we step aside from her, with everybody else that we've met in the show that has control over their own mind, other than Manousos, who's not actually spoken that much other to himself, there's not really been anybody to truly get behind. Vince Gilligan, the creator of the show, has centered a lot of his work around anti-heroes in the past, as we saw with Walter White in Breaking Bad and Saul Goodman in Better Call Saul. But what's clear to see here is that Carol is no anti-hero. The show neither has a hero or a villain at the center of it, but instead what it does is it puts us at the epicenter and core of the morality of the show and makes us question and switch sides every week as the idea of individuality and the beauty but horrors of it, which we've seen with the polar contrasting characters, but also the peace and tranquility that's born when a hive mind and a you and I become a we takes over. I almost feel like we're both the hero and villain as we observe in a weird, uncomfortable way. So the lack of a hero and a villain, and also the importance of individuality, is something that I really wanted to explore. Here is Pluribus, who is actually the hero and villain of the story, explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The contrast of Koumba and Manousos. Two of the more interesting arcs in this show that show the two different sides and responses are that of Koumba Diabate and Manousos, the two male characters that we've seen the most. In episode 6 of the show, we saw that Koumba took on the position of a hero and was living the life of luxury as if he was one. He had the penthouse suite in Vegas like Elvis, and he was quite literally dressed up as James Bond and acting out an iconic scene from the movie, when in reality, despite living the life of a hero, he couldn't have been further from it because of the way that he was acting. He was disregarding the bodies of the humans that once possessed them and treating the women like objects. He had no sense of empathy or respect for the people that those bodies represented, and he was happy to enjoy the results of being on his own at the cost of everybody else being gone. He was selfish, and he didn't want the world to go back to normal because it meant that his life would have to change. So even though he's not necessarily the villain of the story, because one would assume that in this story the others are the villain because they've taken over the planet, he essentially stands to gain everything by the world remaining as it is. So he's neither a hero or a villain, but he sits more towards the side of the latter. Whereas when we take a look at the other male character, Manousos, his actions couldn't be further from what we've seen with Koumba. Manousos was reserved, stayed locked away, didn't interact with the others, and saw them for exactly what they were, invaders. We don't truly know where Manousos was when the outbreak occurred and how he came to understand that something terrible was happening to everybody else, but he was clearly aware because he isolated himself and didn't want to be around them. There was a line of dialogue that Manousos said in the most recent episode when the others planned on helping him get to Albuquerque, which was, "Nothing on this planet is yours. You can give me nothing because it's stolen. You don't belong here." This is something that pits him as the character that's more on the side of the hero of the story in the traditional sense. He wants to bring the world back to what it was before, which is the opposite to what Koumba was doing, and essentially save the world. And he quite literally said that when he said to himself over and over again, "My name is Manousos Oviedo. I'm not one of them. I wish to save the world." He even went on a quest to get to New Mexico by driving across the Pan American Highway, by going through the treacherous and deadly Darien Gap, and was prepared to die, rather than accept the help of the people that were infected with the virus that caused them to all connect. However, this is then when the morality of the entire situation comes into play. Even though the joining has cost everybody their individuality, the world is a better place for it in terms of an environmental sense. So is Manousos really the hero of the story, or to the planet, is he actually the villain? What Koumba is doing is morally wrong because he's taking advantage of a situation, but Manousos at least has good intentions within his core. Is the joining good or bad? Now, I went to a Q&A a few weeks back which had Vince Gilligan speaking about the show, and one of the main things that I took away from it, which I feel is at the heart of Pluribus, is the question around if the joining are good or bad, and if they're actually the villains of the show. With the joining coming to Earth in the form of a virus, it obviously took away everybody's individuality, which is what essentially makes human life beautiful. However, whilst individuality can be beautiful, with individuality, something that comes along with it is the desire to be better than another, the hunger for power, differences, conflict, war, and death. This is the very thing that the joining has eradicated. We've seen that they don't hold the ability to harm another living creature. They've essentially brought about peace on Earth. They're environmentally conscious when it comes to energy. The animals are free to roam as they would have done many years ago, and the people that were a part of the joining were describing the feeling as a sense of paradise. So with the Earth in its purest form being a much more safer and prosperous place for all of the creatures and life forms that inhabit it, not just the humans, are the others really that bad? They have no ill intentions other than making the planet thrive and removing all of the things that make the planet a dangerous and deadly place. Again, this is something that provides a slight itch on the brain because technically on paper they are the villain. In traditional storytelling, it's the invaders that are the ones that the world needs to be saved from, but what this show has done is it's almost made the planet the very thing that needs saving from the individuality of humans, because with it, the planet is a worse off place. So again, they're neither the hero or the villain of the story. It just depends which side of the moral fence you side with. Carol explored. What I find so interesting about Carol is that she's not the easiest character to like in the show. She's grown on me as the episodes have gone on, but I think that's because of the emotion that we're now starting to see that she has. She started off as this cold, selfish character, however the loneliness has now taken a hold of her. She's grieving Helen, and by being isolated in the world's largest form of solitary confinement, we've seen the emotions trickle out in the most subtlest of ways. Ways such as when she was eating out dinner at this fancy restaurant overlooking the world and she almost had a thought of, what am I doing? And also when she found out that the other survivors were meeting up without her and actively didn't want her there. Like Manousos, she sits on the side of being the hero of the story because she wants to reverse the way that the world is and revert it back to normal. However, unlike Manousos, who's been written in a way where you're able to connect with him and you're rooting for him, with Carol, she's been written to the point where she's relatively dislikable. She's hard to connect with because she doesn't give much away, but it's almost the passion to bring the world back to the way that it was, where there's that sense of relatability. However, with her not being written in a way where we're instantly on side with her, it doesn't necessarily make her feel like the hero of the story. Why there's no true hero or villain? So to answer the question of why it doesn't feel like there are true heroes or villains in the story and why it feels like our mind is constantly flipping and rotating, it's because the show almost represents the very thing that the joining is trying to destroy: individuality. Lakshmi is dislikable for me, but for others, they might love her. Koumba, I can't really stand, and I think he acted like a pig, but I know other people like him. Manousos, I love, but people think he's overrated. And Carol, well, she's just Carol. The others have their reasons for wanting to recruit everybody, and to a certain degree, at their core, it makes sense. So the selfish desire for individuality is then what makes all of those that want the opposite also seem on the side of being against the world. It's just a very well written show where you question what side of the moral fence you're on every single week, and if you should agree with the others for the greater good of the planet, or if you should fight for individuality if it means people gain control of their lives, but the world becomes a worse place in the long run. So, there you have it, my attempt of trying to articulate why it feels like there are no heroes or villains in Pluribus, at least not on the surface level. If you want to see more videos on Pluribus, then check the playlist below. I'm breaking down every episode, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a video. What do you think of the show? Which side of the moral fence do you sit on? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.